Hello and welcome to this webinar from Gluware. I'm Michael Howe, VP of Product Marketing, and we are excited to introduce Gluware 4.1. So we're going to take you through the new features, including the new Data Explorer. So we're excited to get started here and share this information with you. Let's take a look. So before we jump into the new features of 4.1, for those not familiar with Gluware, we're going to give you a quick two-slide overview of what Gluware is. So Gluware is an intelligent network automation platform software. It is peer software, and it is intended to give you software control of your multi-vendor, multi-domain, and even now multi-cloud network. So we're able to automate the brownfield or the existing kind of traditional CLI-based LAN, WAN data center, as well as modern API architectures. And through our Terraform vendor adapter, we're able to automate public cloud architectures as well. A big differentiator we'll touch on in a bit is the fact that Gluware is intent-based, meaning you're defining your intended state with your configuration. The Gluware orchestration engine reads the current state, compares, and does an intelligent provisioning and verification of your intended state. So that's really a true differentiator in that you don't have to worry about building all the pre-checks and post-checks and validations in that it would take if you were going to try to script it yourself. So Gluware is frequently replacing legacy NCCMs that are unintelligent, and Gluware enables consolidation of different platforms and manual efforts into consolidated software. And Gluware can really help dramatically reduce the efforts related to building scripts and playbooks, developing the skill set to do those, the development time, the testing, using them, and then the maintenance. So our customers are finding that the true cost of scripting and playbooks is extremely high compared to what they're actually getting out of the automation for that. So with Gluware, you get continuous optimization, not just day one automation, it's continual inventory and updates in audits and the lifecycle management of your network. And with the Gluware platform, there's a full integrated development environment, or IDE, we call it Gluware Lab, for the advanced users that want to do their own custom data models, build custom network features, do network integrations or API integrations, all available in the Gluware IDE, which is a low-code environment. So let's move on. So last slide in terms of introducing Gluware, and I'm going to attempt to annotate here. What I want to highlight for you is let's start bottom up, and that when you think about what Gluware automates. So I talked about it a little bit, but physical or virtual, we automate really the networking layer, router, switches, firewalls, load balancers, WAN optimizers, and more. We've added the capability of automating controller-based API endpoints like Cisco Meraki or Cisco SD-WAN. And as I mentioned before, we brought on Terraform as a vendor adapter, enabling us to automate public clouds like AWS and GCP and Azure. So that's kind of like what we're doing on the customer network side. Currently, we're not automating things like servers or storage or some things adjacent to the network. Moving up in the stack, when you look at the Gluware platform itself, the key differentiator, as I mentioned in the first slide, is the fact that Gluware is leveraging an intelligent orchestration engine. So we spent a lot of time and effort and money in development of the orchestration engine to make it intelligent. We are a data model-driven platform. Everything we ingest into the network from discovery is wrapped in data modeling. When we're automating configurations, we're deconstructing CLI and then wrapping it in data models, enabling you to automate as much or as little as you want, and enable true intent-based provisioning, where, as I mentioned, you define your desired state of a configuration, and the orchestration engine will make it happen for you. So the orchestration engine then powers all of the Gluware applications. So one of the biggest attributes we have that our customers love is the out-of-the-box nature of Gluware automation with applications like Device Manager to inventory, discover, config drift, and audit to identify changes in your network and run regular audits. OS Manager to automate the painful process of executing operating system upgrades and patching. Config modeling, we refer to it as our superpower, our ability to very intelligently manage configurations across multi-vendors and even very complex configs like QoS and EVPN, VXLAN, and more. And workflows, when you're building more end-to-end process automation or integrating APIs, it's commonly done in workflows. And then from a visibility and data side, we have the dashboard, allows you to visualize the data, and Data Explorer brand new application we're announcing. It's part of our Gluware control platform. It allows you to generate the data report. So with that, what you bring into Gluware are your processes, your own configurations, so your own policy and compliance, as well as you can leverage things like standards-based example audits. But basically, Gluware is not predetermined what your configuration should be or putting constraints on what you can automate. You can essentially automate anything the underlying vendor supports. You can automate through Gluware, and Gluware does have the GluAPI, published RESTful API, to integrate with Gluware programmatically. So in terms of how Gluware is delivered, we have Gluware Pro, which is an AWS hosted SaaS, or Gluware Enterprise, which is we kind of refer to as Gluware Your Way. Generally, it's deployed on-prem, where we supply one or more virtual machines and you deploy as needed. That is enabled by our Gluware multi-engine architecture. So we're able to actually put the processing power of Gluware out closer to the network nodes when you have a large distributed network, enabling us to scale to tens of thousands of devices and have very good performance with that. So moving forward, it's very flexible in terms of the way you want to deploy and sizing to your network, and highly scalable. So with that, let's move forward. All right, so let's jump in the new content. I want to move through these slides relatively quickly so I can get through it in about half my allotted time, so I can jump into the user interface and show you a lot of this new and in the user interface. So in terms of what's new, we put it into three main buckets. So there's enhanced usability and security, highlighted by the left side navigation and new authentication mechanisms into Gluware. The data-driven insights. So we're very excited to announce our new Data Explorer application. We're going to highlight several use cases in a demonstration. The dashboards have also been enhanced with new widgets and additional capabilities that power the data we're surfacing from the underlying network. And we continue to expand on the multi-vendor and multi-domain support across the most popular vendors in customer networks. So moving forward here, what does the usability enhancements look like? Well, the first one is that what I mentioned of the left-hand menu. So what you're going to see now in Gluware is we're moving from kind of the Google-style app switcher to the left side driven menu. It's just more intuitive, and with the ability to navigate directly into specific areas of the UI, it's less clicks and more streamlined as you switch between solutions. So you can have that menu expanded or collapsed. Certainly I would recommend keep it expanded as you're getting used to it. You might not recognize the icons as they have been refreshed. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you still have your user menu with your preferences, and some new preferences are exposed there, including this is where you can turn on or off showing licensed or unlicensed solutions and the solution names if you want to show them or not. If you turn them to show, you'll see the full solution name in the expanded menu. Next, when you navigate into config modeling, you're going to see a bit of a refresh from a look and feel as well. New icons, updated font across the app, kind of unifying the font as you're working through the apps in Gluware. We now have a solutions navigator and a tree style navigation for your nodes, features, globals, domains, and scripts. So really it just kind of streamlines your activity, and use in Gluware allows you to navigate directly into a filtered subset of things, and with the search bar there you can go directly to it if you're looking for something specific like a feature like DNS, and we'll see that in the demo. Another usability feature we added is users provided the feedback they wanted more understanding in Gluware of the reachability status to the devices that we're managing. So we've added a new column that's called access status, and in it we're displaying the latest attempt of when Gluware went to connect to that device, and you can see the different status levels of here of it's okay, or we could connect, we could reach it but we couldn't discover it, we couldn't authenticate, or it was unreachable or unknown. So that information is available in the Device Explorer and all apps, as well as config modeling and the grid. And as you click into the device details, you'll also see more information in details. In terms of security features, as everyone is always concerned, related to hacks and concerns with unauthorized users gaining access into systems, Gluware, it has enhanced the security signing into Gluware with 3 new enhancements. First, at the system level, you have the opportunity to choose SAML or OAuth, also known as PKCE, and define the parameters there required to turn on that system level authentication. Another option is we've enhanced the 2-factor authentication on a user level that now supports external authentication. So now we work with the Google Authenticator, where once you've enabled 2FA, you get a barcode that drives you to Google that gives you a PIN, and then you sign into Google with that PIN. So new enhancements to improve security, accessing, logging into Gluware. The last security feature here is that for users of Gluware Pro, which is our solution again that resides in AWS and is managed by Gluware, users deploy the Gluware Secure Gateway on the customer prem to provide a tunnel back to the cloud-hosted instance. Well, that Secure Gateway has been enhanced now with the new Envoy proxy. Envoy proxy is a well-known industry-used proxy, and what it offers users is the ability to establish one SSL tunnel instead of SSH, and all of the Gluware control messages related to logging into devices or syslog or file server messages are all tunneled over the single SSL control session. So it's simpler from a setup standpoint, requires less intervention with your security team because usually SSL is open, and it's just a bit more seamless and helps support all the related services that Gluware offers in the Pro offering, like OS Manager that requires file servers and syslog for identification of when users make changes and more. So that's a nice change for the Gluware Pro users. So moving forward into the data side, we're excited to introduce the new Data Explorer applications. And there is 2 main pieces to the Data Explorer app. You have the template editor and you have the real-time report viewer. So with the template editor, what you have is the ability to surface any data from the underlying Gluware databases and put it into your report. So you have a very flexible editor to add the related rows and columns that you want displayed. And it's quite powerful because you can build really customized reports with Device Manager or Drift and Audit or OS Manager or Discovered Information. We're going to highlight a number of use cases in the live demo. When you build your report, you're able to, right within the app, you can select devices and run your report, and you have the integrated real-time report viewer. So the report viewer lets you assess your results directly in there. So some users want to work directly within the UI. Other times, once you have things set up, you want to just have a report generated on a regular basis. So let's say you have a security-related report or an inventory-related report or a port utilization. Whatever your reports might be, you can set them up and put them on a schedule, and you'll be notified and you'll get the report, and you can choose CSV, PDF, or JSON format. So with that, I'd like to describe a little bit further about how we mine the data and enable users to create the custom reports. So and I'll annotate a little bit for clarity here, in that Gluware stores everything, as I mentioned. Gluware stores everything I mentioned in an underlying database, and we wrap everything in data modeling. Those data models are stored in the internal databases that are the non-relational and the relational database. Prior to 4.1, the way you access that data or view the data is when you navigate into each solution like Device Manager, Drift and Audit, OS Manager, you have the grid-related data in the Device Explorer, and you have a default set of report that is generated out. And that was a fixed report. It was essentially all the data from that app. So Gluware was kind of dividing up the view of your underlying data into app-specific information. For other enhanced reports that we added, we put those inside of something we call the data export. So data export had things like your Cisco hardware inventory and your license report, among others. So when Gluware pre-built special reports, We provided those in the data export utility. Now with with Data Explorer, you have full access to the database. So you have the ability to browse all the data from all of the apps, as well as new discovered data, which I'll talk about, and you can build user-defined reports. So with those user-defined reports, once they're built, you can execute them in Data Explorer, and they're also available directly to run from each one of the applications. So as I mentioned, the applications already have default reports, but let's say that's not the information you want when you click the one button export. You want to customize it. So we do offer the ability to take a custom user-defined report and declare it as the default report for each app. So let's say I don't like the default drift and audit report. I can build a new custom one, assign it here, and then each time I click export report from drift and audit, I'll get the new custom report. So in addition to that, Data Export supports import and export of these reports. And from the Gluware knowledge base, you can download over a dozen example reports, and we'll continue to grow that library. But example reports include hardware inventory and port utilization, port state, layer 2, layer 3 configuration, and much more. So I think you're going to find this very useful, and we'll dive into a little bit more of the features and the use cases in a minute here. So one of the newest advancements that's really helping power those reports and make them really meaningful when you're thinking about security and capacity planning and inventory is with our device discovery that's interrogating each device. We've now expanded device discovery, we call it advanced discovery, to capture more information about the ports, the layer 2 configuration and operational state, and the layer 3 configuration and operational state. And that data is now available in Data Explorer to generate into your reports. So we're going to highlight some examples there, but just for a very quick example, if you're trying to understand how many ports on a switch are up and maybe admin down, or admin down or up, admin up, but operationally down, or you want to see a report to look at the MTU or speed in duplex or something like that, now it's very easy to quickly generate out a report and examine it for consistency in configuration and operational state, helping to improve things like security and performance. So with that, let's move on to the last slide here around Device Explorer, and we're going to jump into several use cases so you can see it live in action. But as I was mentioning, a couple use cases here, and what you're looking at in this screenshot is a port utilization or port usage report. So we're looking at ports free, ports available, and then in the embedded report viewer, we can do calculations like calculate the percentage available ports and sums and averages. So you can see your total ports, your averages, your sum. So again, this example, kind of jumping a little bit ahead in terms of a port usage report. This is a great example of how Gluware can help with capacity planning for your data center or your campus switches when you're looking at port utilizations. So just covering the other use cases to highlight, and we're going to see a bunch of these live. A detailed hardware inventory report helps with just managing the lifecycle of devices and understanding what is deployed out in your network. The second one here is the switch port usage and state report. The third one is something that comes up all the time around understanding resources like IP addresses and VLANs that are assigned in the network. The fourth, probably one of my favorite, around being able to build a combined report that has your drift state, if it passed audits, maybe if an OS upgrade was run, where you can get a lot of data generated in one report and kind of consolidate your view versus having to do individual reports per app. And the fifth one is one we ported over from Device Export, which is the ability to export a report of the discovered licenses. And that's for Cisco today, and we can expose it for other vendors if they have that. But with Cisco, we're executing the show license and looking at the device to understand what licenses are enabled and what EULAs are accepted, and you can generate out that report if you're getting audited and need to understand what licenses are in use and what is being paid for. Moving on, another enhancement around kind of the data visualization side is with dashboards. So we introduced the Gluware dashboards in 4.0. Now with 4.1, We've added a number of new widgets. The starburst graph is one of the most visual in terms of looking at things like vendor and operating system version, and you can get a sense of how many operating system versions you're running across vendors in a visual report. Another very handy one is the new license summary, so you can see how many licenses you have, how many are in use, and what solutions are licensed. And then a number of other widgets that are just helpful for daily activities around IPv4 calculator, a regular calculator, an activity count, a task list if you're managing jobs and things you're doing within the app. So let's move on from there. One of the things we collect from Cisco through our API integration is the end-of-life, end-of-sale information. We've expanded what we're capturing and displaying in the application with end-of-life, end-of-sale all the way down to the component level. So we've had customers ask to expose this because things like power supplies and fan cards and other components go end-of-sale and end-of-life. So that is exposed. It's also available in the reporting. Another component that is an interesting progression in Gluware is that Gluware is enabling you to move towards infrastructure as code. However, when you're using Gluware, the apps, we want to make it like a no-code type of experience. So with Gluware, you don't necessarily have to learn the modeling and understand and look at what the JSON looks like when we're modeling features and configurations. However, customers are asking to be able for Gluware to be more open to share and make that available. So prior to 4.1, all of the features, you could view the JSON feature and see the rendering when it was populated with the data model and policy configured. The new feature in 4.1 is that from a node view or from an assembly view, you can export out the JSON or CSV. So this is a way to kind of take the data model that Gluware is using to automate the configuration and be able to export it out for reasons of backup or just having record of things outside of Gluware, maybe in GitHub or Bitbucket or something like that. So this is one of those of just kind of opening up Gluware and exposing or sharing the data model so it can be saved outside of Gluware. Another addition we've made for enhancing usability and speed to automate is that the GluAPI now supports the Swagger 2.0 or Open API specification. And what this is and this screenshot, it's a little hard to read here, but basically we're pointing a browser at the Swagger endpoint, and you can see the data model being exposed in the screenshot. So what this enables is for products that can, and if you're automating Gluware via API, you have to make the proper calls to automate. And this ability allows you to ingest the data model and very rapidly onboard the API calls, so you could use those REST calls to automate Gluware via API. So it's really just an effort around helping customers automate or integrate faster when they're integrating Gluware with external systems. There's a number of other smaller features we'll go through, or I don't think we'll have time to share in the live UI, but around ad hoc query, your results are retained. When you run snapshot and you send out an email report, there's a lot of detail in there, as well as you can indicate that the snapshot is automatically captured when you import devices. This saves a step when you go to Drift. In some of our capabilities around syslog and file server and others, we're leveraging containerization, and we've improved our infrastructure for better recovery capabilities related to connection issues when we're managing and maintaining those Docker images. And the last bullet there is around when you're doing config drift notifications and you're generating an email notification, you can get the full details, not just a link to navigate into Gluware, but you can have full details around what drift occurred. So the last slide here, and then we're going to jump into the live UI, is just the expansion of Gluware across vendors. And what I want to highlight here is that the majority of components you're seeing here are released in between major releases. So the Gluware framework of now Gluware 4.1, while 4.1 is out, we can continue to add vendor support because these are underlying packages that are just added to the infrastructure. So since 4.0, we've had numerous enhancements and vendor support here, expanding the config modeling. Config modeling kits are essentially libraries of ability of automation, usually dozens of features that we're able to automate out of the box that we've pre-built for you. And you can expand those libraries, but across Juniper, Arista, HP Aruba, Cisco, as mentioned in the intro, we've expanded the ability to automate API-oriented controllers like Cisco Meraki and Cisco SD-WAN. And we continue to enhance OS Manager, adding ability to automate operating system upgrades and patches across additional devices like HP Aruba, additional Cisco devices, and F5. So with that, let's jump into the live UI and look at some of these features. Okay, here we are in the Gluware instance. Let's get signed in and jump through the new features that I just went through. So as we get signed in here, one of the first features we want to highlight here is the new left side nav. So instead of having the app switcher in the upper left corner, you're going to have the left-driven nav menu on the side here that expands out as you float over it. So if I want to go into my device manager, I can go directly into my device manager. And if I want to go into drift and audit, I can highlight it. If I want to go right into audit policies, I can use a sub navigation and drill directly into that. So one of the benefits you're going to like right away is just the streamlined usability of changing between apps, as well as navigating directly into the segment of the app that you want to get into. Also to highlight is that the order is drag and droppable. So let's say I use config modeling the most, I can drag that up to the very top. Or if I want dashboards on the top, I can drag that. So you can drag and drop here. Also, there is a more full expansion here with the arrow key. And if there are things you rarely use, let's say for some reason you rarely use OS Manager, you can drag it down into the expansion of more, and so on and so forth. So that's the main aspect of the left nav menu. So all of your apps are here, as well as your settings. Settings are accessed through here, and you navigate into there, and help. With that, on the right hand side, you do still have your user menu. If you click in, and if you can edit your own profile here, it will take you to your profile to edit. That has not changed. You can edit your preferences. So this is new in terms of changing between a light and a dark theme to show licensed or to show unlicensed solutions, to show them or to hide them. So if for some reason, let's say you didn't license OS Manager in your build or instance, you could hide that solution there since it is not usable. And then solution names, if I move this to hide, what you're going to see is the menu just stays collapsed, and then you're essentially relying on your memory or the recognition of the icons that you become familiar with here, like the new Data Explorer. So with that, that pretty much wraps up the left side nav. Let's navigate into config modeling. And for me, I do like my solution names shown. So I'm going to go to config modeling, and we're going to navigate just into the app here. So you're going to notice a bit of refinement as you notice the config modeling app. One in that the font has been updated. It is streamlined and unified throughout the Gluware app and all solutions, as well as there is the new solutions browser. Right now, everything is bundled into all solutions, but if solutions were created in Gluware Lab and there was a subset of things you wanted a user or an instance to see, in config modeling, you could define it as a solution and then navigate only that solution, or filter essentially Gluware to just that solution. Also, as you expand this tree here, instead of your kind of node feature global, the main color blocks or icons across the top, you now have the ability to just drill down and then to get directly into the subset that you want to get to. So this does also improve or reduce clicks and improve navigation experience by going into kind of the sub-filtered areas. If I was looking at just trying to navigate into a DNS feature, I could do that. And so just really kind of streamlined. You still have your search and your filter that would apply as well. So let me delete that out. One other minor thing you're going to notice is just the icons. You still have your bottom space where you can expose your terminal window, your node instance map, the regex editor, and the workflow browser. And then the right has not changed as well, other than the icons where you get your details, your instance, when you're provisioning nodes, and the provisioning logs. All of that is still there. So not too much changed, but a bit of streamlining from the top level navigation. So let's navigate back into Device Manager. And we're going to highlight something you notice right away because the color jumps out is this new access status column. And in the access status, we're highlighting what is the status of these devices. So if I click in on this 3650 switch, not only do I see it in the grid, but I can see that the access status is okay. If I take a look at this Juniper virtual device here, if I click into it, it looks like that is an unreachable type of, so when Gluware tried to access the device, it was unreachable. I can get into logs and see I had no connection to that IP that was given to me. So that virtual device is likely not there anymore. And when I have an orange, if I click in here and I look at my device status, I can see that this device is undiscoverable. So I was not able to discover this device even though it's potentially IP reachable. So that's a nice, the access status is really kind of giving you that high level view. If the connectivity to that device is good, when you're then going to perform an action in Gluware like a discovery or like a drift or an audit. So this is across all the apps, including if we navigate back into config modeling and we go to the nodes view. Config modeling has a slightly different grid, but if we scroll, I believe I've added it in here, the access status, we don't have the visual, but we do have the status here that's displayed. So you do have access status available in all apps, including config modeling. So let's jump into the last feature to highlight in this quick intro video. If we go to our global settings and actually to get to this first feature I want to highlight, you're going to have to navigate into your primary system org. So the features for SAML and OAuth single sign-on, you navigate into your primary system org. So in this case, it's the Gluware system organization. It's been the default name. And there's a new option when you go in there, which is called single sign-on. If you go into single sign-on, you have new options for turning on SAML or OAuth, which is also PKCE. If you turn on one of these options, you're going to see the form that you would be familiar with if you understand these protocols to turn on that form of authentication. And this is really just hardening the access into Gluware with additional security options of turning on SAML or the OAuth protocol for authentication. So that will improve ways in which, or make it more difficult for users to sign in, therefore hardening the security of accessing the Gluware system. The last one I'll touch on here is if I'm in settings and I'm in my user settings, if I for an individual user, if I enable two-factor authentication, we've updated our two-factor to leverage a third-party authenticator. In this case, we're using the Google Authenticator. So once you enable this, you're going to get a barcode that you have to go and use in Google, and then from Google you will get a PIN that when you sign into Gluware, you will be asked for your PIN, and then you will authenticate into the system. So this will, push that or enforce that two-factor authentication in a pretty standard mechanism. In this next section, we're going to jump into the Data Explorer app and look at 3 use cases around capturing the inventory details to improve the hardware lifecycle management, looking at security type reports that can show you the operating system version running and things like P-certs that are issued on those. And third, we're going to look at the new features around capturing layer 2 and layer 3 configuration and port information, which can help you verify and maintain performance in the network. Let's take a look. So let's take a look at Cisco Extended Inventory. As I double click that report, so this is where you can see kind of browse the data available to you, and the search is very handy because if I wanted the IP address, I could search for it in this box, find it, and then populate it in. If I believe this report already had the device IP as a field. So just getting back to a few of the basics up on top, you name it. I think it's very handy to add a description, and then you have the option of orientating the report to be column-based or row-based. Generally, if you don't specify this, the row will be each device. So you'll have a unique device on each line, and then all the data will be column-oriented. Where it makes sense to do row orientation is, let's say you want a device, but then you want a row per, let's say, port, or a row per license, or some other corresponding thing where you can have a lot of elements tied to one physical device. The layer 2 port status is a good example of, you'll see all the ports associated, by row under one particular switch. I could deem a report the default for the applications like Device Manager, Drift and Audit, or OS Manager. That's where you would indicate that with these checkboxes. You also have the ability to share within your org. So if this is private, when I navigate in, or others are, Gluware is a multi-user system. If it's private, others won't see this. If I make it public, others can see it, and I can even make it available into sub-organizations. So Gluware is hierarchical in the way that you can create your organizations and you can make those available. As well, as I mentioned, you can export. If, let's say I create this as a private report, I can export it out and save it as a JSON file, and I could share it, and someone else could import it in. So that would be a way of sharing. So now that we've gone over some of those basics, let's go ahead and get a report running here. So what we do is switch over to the device view, and here's where you'd select one or more devices. And it's also very handy that you have filtering and sorting. So let's just say I wanted to search for Cisco. I just typed Cisco, and all the relative Cisco devices are here. So as you're looking at, how do I select my set of devices, this is where the grid functionality is going to come very handy. Again, you can just type in here or delete this. You can use regex. You can apply a filter and look for something very specific. So all of those things, again, covered in other tutorials, but I did want to use this example where I will filter on Cisco, and I'm going to use this 3650 as a real hardware device, and I'm going to say run a report, and the report is going to be the Cisco Extended Inventory Device List, and hit run. It runs quickly because we're not interrogating the device again. It is pulling from the database. So that's one key benefit here, is that you're not having to requery the network all the time. If you want to refresh the data, you can go to any of the apps like Device Manager or Drift and Audit. Anything that's essentially touching the device will update all of the fields. But basically, when you pull it from the report, you are pulling it from the database of the last stored data. So this report isn't super exciting because it's a one-liner. However, if I look across here, look at all the information collected, serial number and SKU. And as I scroll over here, information about operational state, like high availability, and if it's disruptive, if it's licensed, and getting into end-of-life, end-of-sale is included. P-certs, this one has no criticals, which is good. As I scroll over, you have the SKUs for the power supplies and even component level information. So this type of detail is very, very useful when you are trying to inventory your network and find out exactly what's there in a lot of detail. So let's look at the Cisco P-cert summary. So if I double click on that, I'm going to see a relatively short report, which is just name, description, IP, SKU, operating system, and then we are pulling the critical advisories, high advisories, and medium advisories. And this is done through API integration with Cisco. But instead of trying to list out all the advisories, we're actually summing it's a calculation is being performed to give me a total. So this is where, again, let's say I'm in operations, a regular task for me might be a security audit in some fashion. And if I know that, the devices I have out there have 0 criticals, well, if it turns from 0 to 1 or to 5, maybe now I need to pay attention. So this type of report is super handy to generate on a regular basis. Let's go ahead, now that we've looked at this report, let's go ahead and run it. So let me jump back to my device list here, and I'll just select all the Cisco devices. Now, what's going to happen is only the Cisco devices supported by the Cisco API will resolve data. So that's one thing to point out. So some of them might not have data associated with them, but let's go ahead and run the report. The report I want to run is the Cisco PCert summary, and hit run. Again, you can see I can schedule it, and back to here, this is also quite useful, is that I selected specific devices. However, you can have a filter, and if you use a filter, it's useful when when devices are being added and removed in your network. So if I create a filter to filter on Cisco, that filter will always apply, or I could filter on a specific type of, like, Cisco switch or whatever it may be. So let's go ahead and run this report again. And again, what you're seeing here is I'm actively running and looking at the report in the report viewer, the Data Explorer, the results here. And I can see the data here, my 3650. Again, these others are virtual. So while there are advisories, because it's based on the operating system version, they could be actionable, but it's generally more something you're paying attention to a little bit more on your hardware series products. And I can see again here, there's no critical. So if I was running CSRs in production and a critical popped up, this would be something I would be concerned with. So I can navigate back over to Device Manager and see exactly what that PCert's all about. Let's jump into some of the new content that's available now. And I think this layer 2 port state report is pretty cool, because what I've done in this report was I just went, if you look at discovered data and you look at your layer 2 ports, basically I dumped all of these fields into a report. In addition, I put the device name, so you could put information about the device, but then you're going to want, so if you look it up here, from general, I have the name, and then everything else, and then from discovered, I put the host name, and then everything else here is discovered information that I have. So, and again, since I hit add row, this one showed up here. I'll just delete that off, and that confirm. I don't need that last one there. So let's go ahead and run this, and again, I'll navigate over to my device view. My 3650 is a real switch, so let's go ahead and run the layer 2 port state and hit run. Okay, so this is generating out a report for one switch, but if I had a dozen switches or 100 switches in a campus or a data center, I would traditionally be having to go and execute this command and then look at the CLI and then somehow extract that data out. When I'm trying to run reports or even archive data, or take a snapshot of where I'm at, or assess how many ports are available or in use, it would have been pretty painful. Now you can just generate it right out into a report. I can see all of this is a 24 ports of GigE here on this switch, and then there's an additional 4-port module here. So I can see here, and as I scroll across, what VLANs are assigned, what VLAN name, what operational state. So let's just say I expected NAC to be on every port. I could flag that could be a security related thing. And then you get into some operational things like speed and duplex and MTU. And if my policy is to hard code speed and duplex, and it's sitting in auto, that could be a red flag for me. Or if I see an MTU mismatch where something is not using the default of 1500, that could be a concern for me as well. So again, these reports provide a lot of data to process for network operations, and the goal is to get it involved in your automated processes. So sometimes you're generating these reports ad hoc, kind of looking at some things, and maybe it's helping with troubleshooting or assessing. But more often, I think it's going to be the case where you have certain regular activities that you do besides working tickets and working change issues, and that you need to perform a capacity planning activity, or you need to perform a security assessment, or maybe you're acquiring a new company and you need to figure out how their network is configured and what's running, and you're doing an assessment. These types of reports and capabilities are super useful in all of those areas. So let's take a look at one more report here. Just navigate back to my template browser. We'll take a look at the layer 3 port report. I find this one good for when I'm for me, in a relatively, these devices are networked together for various demos. And so I want to understand how the IP addresses are configured. Let's just say I'm trying to very quickly troubleshoot what's happening. Instead of going device by device, I'll just generate a layer 3 port state, hit run, and I get my results. So what I can see is each of these devices have a gigabit Ethernet 1 up and configured, and I can see the addressing scheme here, and I can see the mask, and I can scroll over and then understand some of the operational things too, like the MAC or the MTU, and what the port state is. So these are virtual CSRs. You can add additional virtual interfaces and tie them to things, but again, just a demonstration of a quick assessment when you're trying to look at IP addressing, or maybe spot an issue with an incorrect subnet mask or MTU or something like that. We'll take a look at one last one, because in one of my reports I was playing around a little bit with something we exposed around conditionals. So I'm gonna look at this report, this particular template. It was called Mike's first template, and it was the very first time I'm playing around it. And use case came up where you may want to check for a specific operating system version that you expect in the network. And with that check, I want to apply a conditional formatting. So what we're going to see here is we're pulling the name, the SKU, and the OS version. If I click on edit, if it equals 16.12.1a, it's green. And then inherent or implied, anything that's not 16.12.1a would not be green. Therefore, could be something of concern if that's what I was trying to very quickly visually assess. So again, if I just take this simple report here, I navigate to my devices, I'm going to grab this same set of routers here and apply what's called Mike's first template and hit run. I see my results here, and the SKU is, there's a conditional on that. It's green as expected. They're all CSR 1000Vs. My CSR 1000Vs are 16.12.1a, all good. Okay, so again, a form or a version of a quick report that you can then use for assessment. Let's run one last report here, because I did forget about one I wanted to highlight. So let's navigate back to the reports. And this is around capacity planning and understanding, port utilization. So let's look at the port summary report, which gives you my layer 2 and layer 3 free and used port totals. So let's navigate back, and this time, for the heck of it, we'll just select all the devices here. We're going to execute a report, which is the port summary, and hit run. And what it's going to highlight for me, it's going to look at these devices, the ports free, the ports used, the total ports, and then it's going to do the calculations for me. It's going to give me my percentage ports used, percentage ports free, totals. And this type of assessment, again, can just be very useful for things like capacity planning or understanding, when I might be at an area of concern. And so clearly this report, I didn't build this one. This was one provided for me as a reference report, which will be available in the Gluware knowledge base to download and use. But basically there's conditionals on when you're above a certain amount, it changes color to red, obviously because these are 100% used, therefore there's no availability, right? So if I was looking at a capacity planning exercise And these happen to be virtual, so again, we could add ports, but this one's a real switch. That's 70%, 73% used. I may have to upgrade that if I was adding more servers or adding something in my network. So that's a quick highlight of a number of use cases around using Data Explorer and how it does integrate in with all of the apps. What I didn't get to show you, and of course there's always more, is that you can generate out reports for your drift and audits, for your OS upgrades, and for your configuration information like this node provisioning summary, which tells you what nodes got provisioned, what features, what assemblies, and what the results were. So with that, we'll conclude this demonstration, and we want to thank you for your time and interest in Gluware. To learn more, visit gluware.com. From there, you can contact us to request more information. We'd love to provide for you a detailed demo and help to address questions related to the use cases and challenges you're trying to solve. You can also request a test drive where we'll set you up with a virtual lab and you can use the applications hands-on, and all you need is some time. You can also request a free trial where you can be enabled to use Gluware in your environment. So we look forward to working with you. Thanks again for your time and attention.